Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Perfect RIA podcast, What Works Wednesday edition. I'm your host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me today we have a special guest, Dustin Corrente with Prudential Advisors. Dustin not only has a lot of experience in our industry, he currently works with and mentors, leads some 160 advisors, and so has a lot of experience both with the day-to-day operations of financial planning practices, but also what it takes, I think, to mentor advisors from level to level. And Dustin, you and I recently became acquainted because in a team meeting you guys used my book, Deliver Massive Value, for part of the curriculum. So really excited and flattered to have you on the show today.
Yeah, Matt, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's really my pleasure. Would love to hear just a little bit more about your background, Dustin, your involvement with advisors today, and then we want to jump into some of the things that you've been doing to deliver massive value to advisors and then to their clients as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. So, Matt, I'm actually started my 21st year in the industry this year, and it's amazing how fast the time goes. I remember being a first-year advisor, making cold calls, and doing old school lead generation, and now it's 21 years later, and lots changed in the business.
So you would have started still kind of in the depths of the .com post 9/11. So you started in 2001?
Yeah.
I started in 2003, so I was just a little bit behind you, but great timing on all of our parts to get. I guess the market went nothing but up from there.
That's right.
So you started in 2001 at the very basic level, right? And now I apologize for titles, but you're working with some 160 advisors all up and down the East Coast.
Yeah, Matt, I was fortunate. I came in, I spent the first roughly 11 years of my career with Ameriprise, originally American Express Financial Advisors. And, I had some great leadership around me and great mentors that I owe a lot, to my development over the years. And the first few years of my career, I was an advisor. I loved it. It was great. I got introduced into leadership very quickly after starting in the business. And ultimately, that's the track I decided to go with. I was fortunate to be able to sell my practice at an early age, the first 5 or 6 years that I was in the business. And since that time, I've been working with advisors and coaching them ever since.
I love that. I was just when I do podcasts, I record them in batches. We kind of do a surge meeting. And I was just on the phone with a good friend of mine, Matthew Doherty, who is an Ameriprise advisor still to this day. So it's always a small world. Well, talk to us a little bit. I'm trying to figure out the best way to position this. It doesn't just seem self-serving to me. Like, talk to me about what you loved about my book. Seems a little self-serving, but I'd really love to hear about what you're seeing advisors implement that's delivering value to their clients.
Yeah, where I would start with this, Matt, is I have a very good friend who is an advisor here in my firm. He's one of my best friends. And unfortunately, I think roughly 6 months ago, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
Oh, no.
And so I, from time to time, as often as I can, I go over to the house and visit with him. And I don't remember exactly when it was. It had to be at least 3 months ago or 4 months ago. I was sitting on the couch with him, and there was an Amazon box there. And I said, "Hey, you want me to open this for you?" And so he opened it up, and sure enough, your book was inside the Amazon box. And I had never seen it, honestly. I had never even heard your name before that. And so I started flipping through it, sitting on his couch. And, as I was checking out some of the sections, I'm like, this looks great. And so, I said to him, "Hey, do you mind if I steal this? I'm going to steal the book." And so, ordered it. I ended up ordering, a dozen copies for the leadership team. And, we started going chapter by chapter. And that's how this kind of originated into then hosting the leadership retreat a month ago and, spending about half a day on some of your best practices.
Wow. I'm real sorry to hear about your friend's illness. That's really tough. Life is short. Life is short. But interesting way to discover the book. Yeah, I had, when I wrote it, I just wrote it for me. Like, I thought, here's all the things I wish somebody would have told me. And I just threw it up on Amazon, and we talked about it on the podcast. But yeah, it's interesting to see how people discover it. And it's super flattery is not the word. Like, I'm super honored when people say, hey, listen, there was actually things I took and I was able to implement into my practice.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me that I noticed right away, and as I was talking to Mike as well about it, was your authenticity and just the ability for someone who started out just like you did in the business, 21 years ago, and a lot of the people I work with day to day, just the challenges that advisors go through and the mistakes that are made and how you learn from those mistakes. I thought you did an amazing job kind of laying that out throughout the book. And I felt personally, and I know a lot of the leaders that I talked to when we did the retreat, they felt like they could really relate to that versus some of the other books that are out there. I mean, there's good stuff in there. There's good takeaways.
Yeah, for sure.
I haven't found many where I felt like it was truly an authentic viewpoint coming from an advisor that's currently in practice.
It's an interesting point you bring up, Dustin. Too often as advisors, or just as an industry, right, we pat on the back the guy or the gal that's got the top practice and is at the top of the table or whatever that is, and we sort of brush over like how incredibly difficult it is to be a financial advisor, to be an entrepreneur. And I know for me, and I would imagine, please correct me if I'm wrong, for you as well, that when we had those hard times, it can feel like, hey, I'm the only one who's struggling like this. I'm the only one that doesn't know what to say to a prospect. I'm the only one who's questioning my value or doesn't know how to deliver value to clients. And it turns out it's like all of us, but nobody talks about it.
Well, you're absolutely right. And again, in my opinion, is brilliant about the way that you put this together and the way it's written is, and maybe I'm the first person to share this with you, but I believe that it's applicable, obviously, to financial advisors, but leaders as well. And, I was able to, as I started reading through this, I said, this is a no-brainer for the leadership teams that I work with, because many of them maybe don't have the same skill set or haven't spent enough time in practice to be able to deliver the kind of value that you're talking about to their advisors, like the value that you're, bringing to clients. And so I think the book is great for both sides.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. I've only ever had small teams. And so I guess the concept is the same, right? Deliver massive value, dishwasher rule, empowering people. Those are all the same thing, whether you're in the trenches or you're supporting the people that are in the trenches.
Well, it's funny. The thing I connected with right away in your book was what you had early on with the meeting surges. And I had never had a name for it or, maybe created a title for it like that. But for years now, I've been grouping together because there's a lot of advisors in this organization, and there's just no way to, unless you have a system to run that. And also I like to have, time for myself and my family. Yeah. And so I've been doing a version of that for probably 5 or 6 years now. And then when you spelled it out in the book, I was like, that's fantastic. So
it's funny you mentioned that. The more advisors I talk to that are really doing great work, like they all said similar things like, oh, I've kind of always been doing this. I didn't really have a name for it. And sometimes I wasn't even sure why I did it that way. But it reminds me, Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL guy that does the book Extreme Accountability, I got to see him live one time, and he said all great leaders over history, he was talking about military leaders, they all ultimately followed the same strategy, even if they never learned from each other, because that was the strategy that worked. And I think surge meetings is one of those like core things. You've got to block things together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, I don't know if you're referring to muster or if something else, but I took my team out there a couple of years ago.
Did you really? How was that? I haven't been to muster. We were going to go one time, a group of us, and Jocko got COVID and it got canceled, but you guys went out to muster.
Yeah, I took the leadership team, I think it was May of 19 to Chicago, it was phenomenal. Yeah.
That would have been one of his early ones when he was first starting to do muster.
Yep.
Oh, good for you guys. I actually I went to a book signing he did down in San Diego, met some friends down there, and I actually ended up flying with his leadership team. So I'm sitting in first class, and I'm talking to the gal next to me, and she says, what are you going down for? I said, I'm going to this book signing, this guy I like. And so she says, well, who? I said, well, you wouldn't know him, this guy Jocko Willink. And she says, that's actually my boss. I'm flying down there for it. So
oh, wow.
It was a small world. Well, Dustin, tell me a little bit more about when you're talking about delivering massive value, or even when you're coaching all these advisors, right? 160 advisors. How do you try to translate these lessons into things they can implement day to day? Like, it's nice to read about it and say, hey, we're on the same page and we all struggle, but what do I do on Monday? Like, what do I do on Tuesday?
Yeah. I think what I've seen over a couple of decades now in working with advisors is there's a lot of great people out there that are really good at being advisors. I would say that there's a much smaller percentage of those individuals that really truly understand what it means to run a business. They're two different things.
Yeah.
And as you know, and it's, I think where I try, because I have to approach it more from the strategic side, I can't get into the weeds as much as maybe in certain situations that I'd like to. But trying to get them to focus more of their time on the strategic side of the business. And that would involve things like the meeting surges. And, you talk a lot in your book at different points about the time management, and the element of that. You talk a lot about fees. And, I've had thousands of conversations with advisors over the years around fees. And, a lot of times what it comes down to is your, confidence level, your own self-talk and the psychology of all of that. And so I think that's where I try to provide as much value as I can to the advisors, which again, I think your book, although it was written for advisors, I think it's great for leaders of advisors as well to help them with a lot of these concepts.
Would you mind talking to us a little bit more about the fee discussion, Dustin? I know it's something that comes up. I mean, it comes up in every industry, but it comes up in our industry, right? There's sort of this like, is 1% the right or the wrong fee? Is that even the fee that people are charging, right? But so as you're having this discussion with all these advisors, what does that discussion look like? Yeah,
I think that a lot of what you wrote about and what you reference, and also I see in your posts as well, is spot on. I think a lot of times advisors talk themselves out of the fee when it in many cases it's not even an issue for the client, or they're not delivering the value that they should be because they don't have the right system in place. And so a lot of the conversations are focused around that. I do spend a lot of time with advisors around their service model.
Sure.
And again, that's where I hate to keep bringing it up, but that's where the meeting surges come in, and the ability to replicate that service model so that you're not doing something different every single time, because that's impossible to run a business that way. But how the fees tie in, we do it slightly different. I know that, you spelled out pretty clearly in your book that you're not charging a financial planning fee, which is fine. A lot of advisors operate that way. Our firm, and kind of what I brought here from my last organization, is that's the foundation, is the clients that we're bringing in, at least those that qualify, for it, that they are being charged an annual financial planning fee, which is separate from the asset management fee.
So I'd love to chat about this one. Part of the reason I don't charge an upfront planning fee or an ongoing fee is just really some of my own head trash, around it. Like, I don't know, I can't charge people until I've shown them value. But would you mind talking to us about the fee schedule that you're recommending advisors use, especially this separate financial planning fee?
Yeah, I think it's important right up front with the client to differentiate between the two. So part of our process, which it's nothing new, it's just making sure that we're articulating very clearly in that initial conversation that, look, there's multiple ways that we can engage with you, and we'll lay that out. There's ways that we don't want to engage with clients, which is more of like a needs-based approach. I'm not a huge fan of that because it's like a one and done type situation. We want the advisors to be engaging with clients and cultivate the long-term relationship, which typically leads down the path of comprehensive financial planning. And so, what I always talk to the advisors about is, as long as they're differentiating between the two, hey, there is a fee for the asset management portion, but that's only one part of all of the work and all of the value that we're going to be bringing to you. throughout the course of our relationship. And you do a great job laying out all the things that you do. I see all your posts, and sometimes I've even said, man, he could probably charge 5 times as much as what he's charging. So, but that's what we focus on.
I've got, like I mentioned, I've got my head trash around fees, just like everybody else does. I do love the idea of saying, hey, here's our asset management fee. This is what we're charging for this service. And here's what our financial planning fee is. And here's what we're charging for that service. And there are a lot of great advisors who do that. I haven't just personally cracked that code yet. So I'm always fascinated to hear from people that have, especially over such a wide spectrum. What I really appreciate when speaking with you, Dustin, is that you are able to look into so many practices, right? I mean, I can look into mine, I can look into Micah's, I can look into, from a high level, the hundreds of advisors I chat with, but you're looking like intimate, like you see their numbers as they're managed, like you see what's going on day to day. You've got like this lab, if you will, to see this stuff.
Yeah, and that is nice. I really enjoy that, and I enjoy working with the advisors. One thing that's interesting that maybe a lot of people don't realize is, even if you look at the biggest firms out there that are they're known as the financial planning organizations. Ameriprise would definitely be one of those, if not the number one. But within Prudential, we do the most in the whole system. We do almost 40% of the total financial planning of the whole company out of this firm in the Mid-Atlantic.
Wow.
But what's interesting is that when you really break it down and kind of peel back the onion a few layers, the percentage of clients that come in as new clients to the organization, only about 16, 18% of those people are paying an annual financial planning fee.
Interesting.
And the same percentage, roughly, is with a company like Ameriprise or some of those other companies. A lot of people think, every person that comes in is engaging that way, and that's not the case. Even though they do a lot of that work, it's a very small percentage, a lot smaller than people think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to kind of peel back the onion on that and see how those different layers those work. So I love, by the way, Dustin, that you're advocating for these fees, that you've brought in this idea of, hey, we deliver a lot of value on financial planning, and we should be charging a fee accordingly. I think too often in the industry, and this is one of my soapboxes, we almost get in this tyrant of like, hey, you should be charging the lowest fee possible. And that's not the case. Like, you need to deliver value equal to your fee, but if you're delivering a crap ton of value, then you need to be charging a premium fee.
Yeah.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us a little bit. One of the things you'd sent over as a note as far as leadership for advisors or advisors as leaders. And I'd love, as someone who's serving in a major leadership role yourself, I'd love to hear your thoughts in that area. Well, you mentioned why leadership matters as an advisor. And I'm curious if advisors leading their clients, advisors leading their teams, but just kind of your thoughts, leadership as it applies. And it takes me back to one of our earlier comments, which was there are advisors that are really good advisors, but they don't know how to run a practice. Yeah. How does that tie together in your experience?
Yeah, it's I noticed very early on in the career, and I was fortunate. I grew up working with my dad in a family business that he started in 1971. And so I've been around sales and business and my whole life. It's all I've ever known. So for me, some of the stuff might come easier just because I've been around it my whole life. Yeah. But I've noticed as in the years I've been in the business that a lot of advisors struggle with that, particularly the ones that never got into leadership. And it's interesting. I see a lot of my former counterparts or peers that I worked with for many years that were in a leadership role alongside me that have since gone back into practice. They're phenomenal. A lot of these people are outstanding advisors. And the reason, in my opinion, that that's the case is because of the time they spend in leadership. They understand how to lead themselves better. They understand how to lead the staff, the assistants, the team that's around them better. And obviously the clients, because if you can't lead your clients, you're going to have a big problem running the practice.
Yeah, totally. So in addition to these leadership skills, Dustin, what are some consistent themes you're seeing with advisors who are doing really well versus advisors that struggle? And again, we can kind of define what success is on another episode, but when you look at advisors and you say, boy, this advisor is really delivering value, they really have a good practice, what are they doing differently that the advisor that struggles or washes out isn't doing?
I would say it's a great question. I'd say for me, the number one thing I see is that the advisors that are doing really well, they know the value of their time. And so they know where to spend their time, and they're not wasting time on things that are not advancing the business forward, or, in your words, delivering value or massive value to their clients. They also know right away when, hey, this isn't the client for me. This client doesn't fit into my practice. And so I think, it's, although we're, a lot of people get into this business for the right reasons, to help people and have a huge impact. It's also not, and a lot of people might not like to hear this, but it's not a charity. You're in this to make a living and to feed your family. And I think sometimes people that, they forget about that, and they're doing a lot of stuff for free. And that's nice, but if you're not in business 2 years later, you're not really going to help your clients out long term.
Yeah. If you go out of business, that's not going to help anybody. I'm glad you brought that one up. I mean, we like to talk about in the industry having a niche at this sort of high end, but I think sort of the foundation of that, to your point, Dustin, is knowing here are the people I just can't work with, or I just can't work with them on a professional basis, right? If you want to give your Fridays to the CFP Pro Bono Foundation, like, do that. Or work with the library or the local food bank. Like, that is a noble cause. You have my blessing. But when it comes to your day-to-day practice, the lights have to stay on, right? The practice, people have to be paid. You have to be able to pay your mortgage. And so we have to separate. If this is a business, let's run it as a business. If I want to do charitable work, let me do that in a separate space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of people struggle. I'm sure you see this all the time. A lot of people really struggle with that.
Yeah, I met with an advisor at a conference one time, and a great advisor, really good heart, really trying to deliver value. He had grown up in a very poor part of the country, and he was really committed to serving people in that same poor part of the country. And I had to explain to him, I said, listen, you're not going to be able to pay your bills. Like, the kind of people that you want to work with can't afford you yet. Build a big practice, make a lot of money, give money to charity, go back and give time to those people, or plug them into the Dave Ramsey Network or whatever the case may be. But not only can they not afford your level of comprehensive service, they don't actually need it. What they need is someone to tell them to quit having credit cards and so forth. But Dustin, to go back to your other point, sorry, I'm getting on a tangent here. The value of time. You said that advisors that succeed understand what's valuable use of their time and what's not. Do you have some specific examples of that come to mind on either end of the spectrum?
Yeah, well, I think the one I had mentioned before about if they were to meet a prospect, or they're referred somebody and they're meeting with them, advisor, like I know myself, if I were to go back into practice tomorrow and I were to be referred somebody, I think you even referenced it in your book, I would absolutely give that person my time, but I wouldn't spend 2 hours if I knew in the first 5 minutes that it wasn't a fit for the practice. Yeah. And I think that is a huge difference. I think some people, they just don't, and they're just like, oh, I'll spend 90 minutes with this person, even though they're never going to be a client in my practice.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I've recently onboarded or took on a new team member a few years ago, and we've had to work on that to say, hey, there's got to be these steps where we say, all right, I've delivered value to this person. They're not ever going to be a good fit for the firm. How do we transition them away? Otherwise, you can get stuck on that. An example I like to use, I have a retired client. He was a cardiologist, and we'll call him Bob. And I would say, hey, Bob, did you ever do knee surgery? Like, if a friend came to you and they needed a knee replacement, would you ever do this? And for him, it was like the most absurd question ever. He said, no, I'm a cardiologist. I never did anything other than heart surgery. And I said, well, Bob, didn't you study orthopedics in college? He says, yeah, I studied all aspects of medicine, but I would never, ever, ever, ever do a knee replacement. Never. I wouldn't even think about it. And advisors, we have to be that diligent as well. Like, here's who I work with. Here's who I deliver massive value. Anybody else needs to go see somebody else.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the same thing applies to the work that's being done on a day-to-day basis. Even, for instance, writing a financial plan or what goes into that. I thought you did a great job in there. Could not agree more with the one-page financial plan. Yeah. I think that's brilliant. For years, I've talked to advisors about just utilizing the executive summary and focusing on what the clients actually care about, helping them implement. Because they can get lost and drown in 150 pages of a financial plan. For
sure they can. Well, Dustin, this podcast is all about taking action. Like, I could talk all day with you. In fact, hopefully we'll get to do that sometime soon. You and I were talking offline about that. But want to transition into some action items. What are some things based on your experience as an advisor, working with all these advisors, that our listeners could start doing right away?
Yeah, I would say definitely if anybody is listening that's in leadership, I think your book, as I said before, does an amazing job helping advisors. But those that are leading advisors or have the ability to influence or coach them, I would absolutely utilize some of the main topics in your book to do that, because it's a huge value add. Another thing is I think there's a tremendous opportunity out there right now, particularly for advisors that may be a little bit newer in the business than you and I are. If you look back to, I think 2008, when we were at the peak of the number of financial advisors in the industry.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
We're down almost 20% in terms of the total number of advisors that are in the industry right now. And when you add that in addition to what's going to happen here with the great wealth transfer that's coming up, and what's going to happen in the next quarter century, there is a huge opportunity for anybody that's, especially in their first 5 or 10 years in the business, to bring on new clients, capture, assets. The statistics I've seen, which I'm sure you have as well, is anywhere from, I think, $30 trillion to $65 trillion that is going to move from the boomers to, the millennials and Gen X. I mean, that's an unbelievable amount of money, and it's just such a huge opportunity.
That's a good reminder. I'm going to tie that to our third action item, which would be when you get discouraged. And as we talked about earlier, that's inevitable in this industry, probably just in life, but in this industry. I think, Dustin, to go back to your thing and say, boy, there's this just incredible need for the value that we provide to clients. And the need is only getting bigger. It's not, to your point, like we've hit this apex and there are only a few of us will survive. Like there's this massive shortage of advisors. And we need to your other point, we need to be spending our time where it delivers the most value to clients, because so many clients need the value that we deliver.
Yeah. I think there's and what's been interesting the last few years here is there's this big craze with the robo advisors and the low cost providers, and I just am not hearing I don't know about you, I'm just not hearing a lot about that anymore, and people they want to talk to real humans. They want the help and they want the advice and they want the relationship.
Yeah, money is a really scary thing. I mean, we could do a whole episode on this. I always explain to potential clients, I say it's very difficult, if not impossible, to be objective about your own money. And it is. Like, if I think about my own money, I think, oh, wow, am I doing the right thing with my money? But then, like, all right, what would I tell a client? So, again, what we do for clients is just so invaluable.
I do have one more fourth action item.
Yes.
Which ties
I love action items.
Yeah, which ties into what you just said. And this is just something I'm passionate about, but I have 21 years in this business. I studied it even before that. Yeah. I know what I'm doing, but I have my own advisor. I pay my own advisor, and I'm a firm believer in that. I think it's just, to your point before, it's hard to take the emotion out of those decisions when you're doing it for yourself and it's your own money. So for all the advisors out there, that's something to consider and think about.
I'm glad you bring that up. I've got an advisor as well that I work with, not necessarily a traditional financial advisor, but a business advisor, and I run all of my big stuff past her as well, because the same thing. I think, oh, her name's Mon. I say, Mon, I think I should really do this. All right, let's step back. And she's a great mentor. She says, all right, what would you tell a client to do in this situation? Well, you're right. I wouldn't tell them to do that. Okay, so let's not do that. But yeah, it's impossible to be objective about your own money, even for you and I with 2 decades of experience here.
Yeah.
I love it. Dustin, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate the kind words that you've said about the book. Thank you, Dustin. And for all of our listeners, until next time, happy planning.